Again, I encourage people to take seats. So we'll make a start. Insert your voting cards. We're still a few short of a quorum. See the number coming up now. That's good. Good morning, colleagues. We now have a quorum. Thank you very much and for turning up promptly. So we'll get underway with our business of the day. In a few moments, I'll talk through the schedule and my plans for the day. But I will perhaps first go to the chair of the Credentials Committee for an update on credentials. So could we give the floor to Morocco, please?
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et bonjour à toute l'assistance. Effectivement, le comité de vérification des pouvoirs s'est réuni hier et a approuvé de nouvelles lettres de créance. Donc la situation actuelle aujourd'hui, le nombre de parties présentes est de 155 parties et le nombre de lettres de créance approuvées est de 145. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair of the Credentials Committee. This morning, colleagues, I think the schedule for today has been up on the daily schedule for a while and has been displayed on the screens behind me. We're going to start with document 87.1, move on to 72, 76, 58, 74, and then 60. In effect, it's our agenda for last Thursday evening, in a slightly different order. I will also take, depending on progress, two ComDocs, COM 1.1, item 63 on eels, then COM 1.2 on item 70 on rosewood, and I will also try and conclude summary records, COM 1, Rec 8 and 9. So that will probably, I imagine, take us most of the morning, but if we are miraculously ahead of schedule, I may then just start to bring in listing proposals and continue in our schedule. Let's see how that goes. In the afternoon, I intend to continue with proposals to amend the appendices in the order that, or continuing from where we left off yesterday. In other words, from proposal 16 onwards. And we will do that for the entire afternoon session. This evening session, I am going to consider the program, and with your indulgence, I will announce that immediately after lunch. I want to see what other documents might become available, other COM documents that we could be able to consider in the evening schedule, and we will be able to review that at lunchtime. But I do aim to cover a variety of items, perhaps catching up on the plant proposals, looking at some of the COM documents that are already available to us that we won't do this morning, on medicinal and aromatic plants, COM 1.3, and on marine turtles, COM 1.4. I also hope to do the amphibian proposals tonight, so I do intend to kind of put a variety of items together. And we had an evening session yesterday in Committee 2, and Committee 2 struggled to first to get a quorum, and then secondly to keep it as people kept coming and leaving. So I do ask you all to please turn up this evening. If you had any plans, cancel them. We will give you an evening of entertainment that you wouldn't possibly want to miss, and I will try and make sure there's something for everyone. And once we get a quorum, we're going to lock the doors. So please turn up tonight. It is important that we have a quorum so that we can continue our business. I know that means that sometimes you have to sit through items which are maybe not of immediate interest to your country or your region, but we need that to make the convention be able to work and be able to finish our business. We're in our penultimate day today. So the home straight is in sight, but we need to make sure we do the kind of final laps first to get us over the line. I asked yesterday for working group reports, and we had an update from most of the chairs. I forgot to go back to the chair of the Marine Turtle Working Group, but in effect an update from her is no longer necessary because the outcome of that working group is now available online as COM 1.4. I did, however, raise the issue of document 83, where I think on the very first day we had discussed that, and I had invited the proponents to go away and have informal discussions. And I wonder if the proponents are here and might want to offer any comment on progress. So that's document 83, which is on identifying species at risk of extinction, and the proponents were the Gambia, Liberia, Niger, Nigeria, and Senegal. So if any are here, I would like to hear if they've made any progress with those informal discussions. If one of you would like to take the floor. I think I also invited the UK and the United States, and I think the European Union expressed an interest in participating in those discussions. Okay, I see no request for the floor. And if that means that no informal discussions have taken place, then of course, we'll have to come back to document 83 and conclude it, and I'll aim to do that tomorrow. But that means there's still chance for the people concerned to have those discussions, and please let me know of any progress informally. Please let the Secretariat know. We do, but regardless, we will return to the document and conclude it, whether there have been informal discussions or not. With that, I think we go back to our agenda and we start with document 87.1, which is proposed amendments to Resolution Conference 924. The proponents were, or the document was submitted by Botswana, Cambodia, Eswatini, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. And I invite one of those to introduce the document. Namibia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Chair, the world has now reached a population of 8 billion people. Millions of these directly rely on the species of fauna and flora for food, with which they share a common geography, a common history, and that has been crucial in framing cultures in all shapes and forms. In light of growing poverty and increasing food shortages worldwide, the document before us shields the livelihoods and food security of resource-dependent communities. It complies with international human rights standards and is a means to follow other conventions, such as the Convention on Biological Diversity, to establish effective means to take into account the interests of indigenous people and local communities. We represent millions of local people in Southern Africa, but we equally represent resource-dependent communities worldwide whose interests would have finally be recognized by a body whose decisions in one way or another impact the way locals can utilize the resources around them. But not only is this document beneficial to people, it furthermore motivates millions even more to protect CITES listed species instead of having to deal with prohibitions, permits, and administrative challenges. As many parties have confirmed during this meeting, as many multilateral environmental agreements as well as the United Nations confirm, and as a plethora of studies show, conservation cannot happen without people. But instead of sidelining people, our document aims to make people integral to the Convention's mode of functioning. This Convention deals with international trade. Trade is a human concept. Without people, there is no trade. Moreover, the Convention recognizes the different values attached to wildlife in its second preamble paragraph. One of these values is cultural, the other is economic. And it is especially these values the document before us aims to integrate into the way the CITES appendices can be amended and to establish a strategic consideration of livelihoods, food security, and culture. The document supports the entire breadth of resource-dependent communities worldwide, such as Aboriginal, rural, and coastal, and will consequently be particularly relevant for developing states, but also for developed states by addressing interaction between humans and the environment and countless different levels. The document therefore addresses several sustainable development goals we are all committed to. By supporting the document, CITES will be reminded of its own decisions and resolutions pertaining to livelihoods and food security. By simply excluding these from the criteria for making amendments to the appendices, the most relevant mechanism within the CITES decision-making structure, CITES does not live up to its own ways forward. If considered irrelevant during the discussions, we all should be reminded that it was us who adopted these. If livelihoods and food security are truly irrelevant, all decisions and resolutions pertaining to these should consequently be annulled, a step which no sensible party should seek to take. By anticipating possible effects of appendix listing on livelihoods and food securities, parties are much better prepared to effectively protect these and to act proactively in order to avoid adverse consequences. After all, the principles of conservation and sustainable use are integral to modern conservation strategies, best exemplified by the standards set by the CBD. Addressing the impacts of proposed amendments to the appendices on livelihoods and food security effectively combines conservation and sustainable use in a CITES context. Without amending the convention itself, CITES working procedure and scope will be aligned with the contemporary standards of international environmental conservation and human rights law. We therefore request colleagues to support the proposed amendments to Resolution CoP19.24 ref CoP17.1. It's a matter of urgency for both human beings and other living creatures. I submit and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. And with that, I open the floor for comments by parties. Okay, I see Senegal followed by Botswana.
Voilà, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Donc, nous avons suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt l'exposé qu'a fait notre collègue par rapport à cette intention de vouloir modifier l'amendement à la résolution 9.24 par rapport aux moyens de distance des populations. Je pense que la CITES n'est pas là pour prendre en compte les moyens de distance des populations. La CITES, elle est là pour réguler le commerce international par rapport à la vulnérabilité des espèces. Nous pensons que les moyens d'existence des populations doivent être pris en compte au niveau des législations nationales. Parce que chaque pays est souverain de prendre des décisions pour une rétribution des recettes liées à la gestion des ressources naturelles. Ce n'est pas à la CITES de poser ce problème. Ce problème doit être résolu au niveau national. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous nous opposons fermement à cette proposition d'amendement. Merci.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to Botswana, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. Botswana, as one of the proponents for this proposal, would like to express her support for the inclusion of livelihoods and food security in the criteria to amend the appendices. We are aware of the fact that ResConf 8.3 makes mention of the need to consider socio-economic factors, but this has not translated to practical guidance to the parties on how livelihoods and food security can be taken into account when proposals are submitted to amend the appendices. Chair, the issue of livelihoods has substantial linkages with CITES listed species, and therefore we strongly believe that amendment of appendices should consider issues of livelihoods and food security. In particular, indigenous people and local communities that coexist with CITES listed species have their livelihoods and food security negatively impacted by CITES listed species on a daily basis. At the same time, our indigenous people and local communities in particular, and our countries more generally, also benefit positively from income and food security provided by these CITES listed species. In this regard, it is crucial that CITES decision-making considers livelihoods and food security before listing decisions are made. In view of the above, we invite the committee to accept the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Botswana. I give the floor to Japan, followed by Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Japan appreciates for preparing this document to Botswana, Cambodia, Eswatini, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. Japan supports this proposal concerning livelihood and food security of stakeholders. As the IPBES Sustainable Use of Wildlife Species Assessment points out, among other things, the work and CITES need to reflect socio-ecological context. Especially local communities who live side by side with wildlife should be actively embodying. While CBD is making progress in the involvement of the local communities in its work, Reflecting the above, Japan proposed to add a new sentence in the proposed amendment of resolution for the following reasons. As stated in Resolution 8.21, on consultation with the range states on proposals to amend Appendixes 1 and 2, the relevant countries are to be consulted prior to the submission of the proposals. However, we are in a situation where proposals which Japan is related to states are submitted to the Secretariat without proper consultation, and the Secretariat accepts such proposals. While we appreciate the Secretariat's dedication, this situation is very unfortunate for CITES, because the consultations with relevant countries are essential to examine and understand the effects of changes of the listing proposal as much as possible in advance. Furthermore, disregard for prior consultation is contrary to the spirit of CITES to aim to make consensus wherever possible. Japan, therefore, would like to add the following sentence at the end of the sentence in paragraph 10, Annex 6, format for a proposal to amend the appendixes of Resolution 9.24, CoP19. The Secretariat will not accept a proposal if the consultation information described above is not provided. This proposed sentence aims to ensure the appropriate procedure for submission of proposal to amend the appendixes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Would you just read your sentence one more time to make sure that everybody's got it? And slowly too, please. Thank you.
Okay. The Secretariat will not accept a proposal if the consultation information described above is not provided.
Thank you, Japan. I think we've got that now and captured that. Thank you. And now give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Liberia.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe, as a proponent to document 87.1, fully supports the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev CoP17. Parties proposing amendments to the appendices shall consult with relevant stakeholders, ensure that international trade is the primary threat to a species and should consider livelihood options, food security and management programs prior to tabling the proposal. While CITES gives an international platform to trade in endangered species, it is important to note that all trade is done for commercial purposes to conserve wildlife resources, sustain livelihoods, and ensure food security for communities living with wildlife. The proposal was drafted with the ultimate aim on ensuring that local community needs are considered in decision-making. It has the same mechanism for a broader objective on the proposals. All proposed amendments should include and consider livelihoods and food security when amending appendices. In addition to trade and biological considerations, to consider management programs, traditional uses, and benefits to the people who are living with the wildlife. Hence, Zimbabwe fully supports this proposal as proposed by Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. I give the floor to Liberia, followed by the United States.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate Botswana for taking up the time to compile this proposal and coming up with all the justification to have the proposal put forward. But CITES does not deal with the issue of the working of CITES. It deals with the international trade and local biological the listing is based on international trade and biological data. And it does not account for the socio-economic aspect. The socio-economic aspect should be taken care of by the national arrangement that will be done through the various state national legislation and other social arrangement to get the life of people improved and not to bring in the inner working of CITES. So Liberia does not support such a proposal that will amend the CITES and working, and that will change the CITES and its operation, and that could hinder the progress of CITES. So we do not support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I give the floor to the United States, followed by Togo.
Thank you, Chair. The United States thanks Namibia and co-proponents of this document for continuing this important conversation, and we share the view that implementation of CITES is better achieved with the engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities, especially those which are traditionally dependent on CITES-listed species for their livelihoods. We do not agree, however, that the appropriate way to ensure this engagement is through reopening the listing criteria in Resolution CONF 9.24. We think that these are very, very important considerations to discuss socioeconomic factors such as livelihoods and food security for the CITES parties, but we cannot support the direct insertion of these considerations into the criteria to include species in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. We support the current criteria, which are based on biological and trade criteria rooted in the fundamental principles of Article 2 of the Convention, and which can be quantifiable, evaluated objectively, and guide decision-making for inclusion of species in the CITES appendices based on the best available information consistent with the requirements of the Convention and the conservation status of the species. We support the Secretariat's assessment that these amendments should not be adopted, but we do not support the Secretariat's suggestion that the issue of the CITES listing criteria might be considered intersessionally. The United States recognizes the importance of ensuring an open and transparent process for accepting and considering the best available information when parties decide whether to submit or support a proposal to amend the appendices, and we believe that Annex 6, Section 10 on consultation found in Resolution CONF 9.4 already allows for this consultation with parties as well as stakeholders at the national level, including indigenous peoples and people whose livelihoods may depend on species proposed to be listed in the appendices. We follow Resolution Conference 8.21 on consultation with range states on proposals to amend Appendices 1 and 2, and share the results of these consultations in our proposals in accordance with Resolution CONF 9.24, Annex 6, Section 10. Especially based on the conversations that we have heard this week, we think that more of that kind of dialogue is appropriate, and we would encourage other parties to do the same. In the course of these consultations, range states should seek the views of indigenous peoples and impacted communities and other stakeholders at their local, regional, and national levels as appropriate, and share information with the proposing party. We think that a dialogue is critically important to making sure that folks who are bringing proposals and those whose species are impacted by the proposals have full visibility and understanding of what they may expect going into a conference of the parties. In the United States, for example, we have an open and transparent national process for engaging and receiving input from the public through a series of public notices and public meetings that provide civil society with the opportunity to give input into the development of U.S. submissions to and negotiating positions for the conference. We
Can you conclude,
yes,
United
yes.
States? You've been well over 3 minutes
Wrapping
now.
right now, and I apologize. Just we stand ready to work with other parties, on these important considerations. But again, cannot support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. And I do ask delegates again to be brief. We still have a lot to get through in our final 2 days, and I haven't put the timer on the screen yet. I was hoping to avoid doing that. They're using it in committee too. But if things are running tight, we might have to do that with your agreement, of course. But I now give the floor to Togo, followed by Cambodia.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci de nous avoir donné la parole. Et je rappelle que cette disposition ne fait pas, ce critère ne fait pas partie des dispositions de la CITES. S'il faut changer, s'il faut prendre en compte cet amendement, c'est dire que nous sommes en train de changer ces dispositions-là. En effet, les dispositions, les critères socio-économiques doivent être pris en compte par les tests nationaux. Donc, le Togo n'appuie pas cet amendement-là. Nous rejetons carrément cet amendement. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Togo. I give the floor to Cambodia, followed by Mali.
Thank you, the Chairman, for giving me the floor. Cambodia is one of the proponents of this document 87.1. We would like to express our view as follows. Conservation cannot be imposed from above. It will succeed only when the indigenous people and local community impacted by the conservation policy are won over, convinced that addressing conservation issues serve their best interest rather than the interest of distant, highly educated but semi-engaged elite. Several multilateral organizations have recognized this fundamental truth and have crafted their policy and priority in cooperation with IPLC. Sadly, CITES is not among that number. Its approach to working with IPLC has been characterized by inertia, like we discussed last week that CITES has delayed this issue for 5 years. From the point of view of the IPLC, CITES does not talk with them, it talks to them. As a representative from one United Nations Development Program reminded this CITES meeting just a few days ago, life on Earth is a small, complex, interlocking web. Mankind is a part, a delicate skin of the web. And just like the elephant, the giraffe, the hippo, he has the right to be here. And if we are going to be risking his livelihood with our activity, we need to consult with them before all else. I appeal to all parties to support and adopt this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Cambodia. I give the floor to Mali, followed by the United Kingdom.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais aussi être sur la même ligne d'intervention que certains prédécesseurs. L'élément qui a été proposé ici sur l'amendement en question, et les États qui ont fait les efforts pour effectivement présenter, nous les remercions aussi. Cependant, Monsieur le Président, la proposition présente ici vise à insérer des considérations socio-économiques dans les critères d'inscription, ce qui, dans l'avenir, entraverait les efforts d'inscription des espèces et s'appellerait même l'objectif fondamental de la Convention, qui est d'empêcher le commerce international de menacer la survie des espèces sauvages. Monsieur le Président, les moyens d'existence et la sécurité alimentaire devaient être traités par les parties lors de la mise en œuvre au niveau national. À cet effet, Les inscriptions à la CITES ne limitent pas l'utilisation domestique et des substances et lorsqu'elles sont correctement mises en œuvre, peuvent contribuer à garantir la sécurité alimentaire et les moyens d'existence. Pour ce faire, les critères d'inscription ont fait l'objet d'examens approfondis et ont été révisés à 2 reprises par des procédures sémées d'embûches. La deuxième révision a été considérable, s'étendant sur 4 ans et sur 3 réunions de la COP, surtout en 2000 et en 2004. Rouvrir à ce niveau, ces procédures risquent d'affaiblir la base fondamentale de la Convention et devraient faire l'objet d'une forte résistance. Nous nous opposons aux recommandations du document 87.1. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mali. I give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by Gabon. And I've already got a long list of parties, and I think we're hearing a wide range of views, so I'm going to close the list of parties now. So, UK, you have the floor, then Gabon.
Thank you, Chair. We thank Botswana, Cambodia, Eswatini, Namibia, and Zimbabwe for their proposal. Whilst important, we do not, however, agree that we should include livelihoods and food security criteria alongside the current biological and trade criteria within Resolution 9.24 on criteria for amendment of the appendices. Such issues are not part of the determination of whether a species is threatened or potentially threatened by international trade. Their inclusion as criteria for listing on CITES appendices would be inconsistent with the purpose and objectives of the Convention and could undermine efforts to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten the survival of the species. We also do not agree that international trade must be the key driver of population decline for a species to be included in the CITES appendices. A failure to act because trade is one of a number of drivers threatening a species' survival would also not be consistent with the objectives of the Convention. We nevertheless recognise the importance of consultation within CITES processes. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I give the floor to Gabon, followed by India.
Merci. Monsieur le Président, le Gabon s'interroge s'il est nécessaire de rappeler que la CITES s'applique aux espèces sauvages menacées d'extinction par le commerce international en se basant sur des critères biologiques et de commerce. Nous comprenons les préoccupations des auteurs du document Résolution COP 9.24 REV COP 17, mais n'appuyons pas la proposition soumise à examen. En effet, le document vise à amender les critères de la résolution 9.24 REV COP 17 pour l'inscription des espèces aux annexes 1 et 2 en demandant que les espèces remplissent les critères de moyens d'existence et de sécurité alimentaire pour être inscrites. Monsieur le Président, une fois de plus, il est question d'une proposition visant à élargir les critères d'inscription des espèces aux annexes de la CITES, allant au-delà des paramètres énoncés dans le texte de la Convention lui-même. Ne sommes-nous pas ici pour représenter notre peuple, communautés locales comprises? Ne prenons-nous pas tous en compte les moyens de subsistance et les besoins de nos peuples lorsque nous préparons nos positions pour ces réunions? Les considérations économiques sont à prendre en considération par des mesures nationales relevant de la souveraineté nationale de chacun des pays. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Gabon. I give the floor to India, followed by Tanzania.
Thank you, Chair. India appreciates the efforts and the sentiments of the proponents of this document. We feel that at present, this important issue of livelihood is best dealt within Resolution 16.6 and through the national policies and measures of each party. We would, however, like to caution against the emerging trend of the look-alike criteria in paragraph 2b of Article 2 of the Convention being used to list species on Appendix 2 which are not threatened or endangered in any way, shape, or form. The listing of such species when they are commercially important, and when livelihood depends on them, causes more harm than good to the biodiversity conservation in long run. Identification of species in trade will always be an ongoing challenge. We urge parties to focus on improvement of identification methods and techniques rather than the repeated listing of higher taxa to include non-threatened commercially important species. If this trend continues, inclusion of socio-economic criteria for amendment of Appendix 1 and 2 may become a necessity in the near future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. I give the floor to Tanzania, followed by Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania congratulates Botswana, Cambodia, Eswatini, Namibia, and Zimbabwe for submitting this important document, which proposes for the amendment of Resolution CONF 9.24 and the draft decision on the recognition of livelihood and food security in the proposal for amendment of CITES appendices. The United Republic of Tanzania is in the opinion that the issue of livelihood and food security need to be elevated, and we therefore argue parties to consider its adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. And for being brief, I give the floor to Kenya, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Kenya will also wish to thank Namibia and the proponent of this proposal for raising the issues of livelihood and food security in the document. Mr. Chairman, Kenya fails the current criteria, the biological criteria and trade criteria works because it deals with species that are endangered and already in trade, and reintroducing a new criteria that is complex, like food security and community livelihood, will complicate the threatened species. Mr. Chairman, I think this issue can be dealt with at the national level. For example, in Kenya, we have a network of over 200 community conservancies to deal with issues of species conservation and community livelihood. We also deal with food security because when it comes to human-wildlife conflict, it also entails species that are listed. And these conservancies help increase compatible land uses. And I think in the national context, the issue of food security and livelihood can be dealt with. So we do not support expanding the current scope, and also we do not support the proposal by the Secretariat that we create a working group to look at this proposal further. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Cuba.
Thank you very much, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. The number of species listed in the appendices has increased to over 38,000 and keeps increasing by several hundred species at each COP. The total value of international trade control by CITES has gone up enormously, in particular with listing of some commercially exploited marine species and timber, and it reaches billions of dollars or euros annually. People worldwide depend on CITES-listed species for their livelihood, either because they live together with those species and manage and use them, or because they are involved in the captive breeding or artificial propagation of CITES species. After all, over half of CITES-controlled trade is now in species bred in captivity or artificially propagated. Therefore, parties do consider impact of CITES listings on livelihoods. However, the considerations must be done outside of Resolution 924 on listing criteria. The Convention text is clear in that biological and trade criteria are the basis for listings. Further, CITES provides sufficient tools to address livelihood issues, such as delayed implementation in cases where more time is needed to adjust to new listings or technical support to making non-detriment findings. We are convinced that conservation and sustainable use of species is key to securing livelihoods of millions of people in the long term, and that CITES has proven to be an effective instrument to achieve this objective. Introducing a livelihood element to the listing criteria would undermine the scientific basis of decision-making in CITES and weaken the listing criteria. It would lead to situations where species threatened by international trade may not receive the necessary protection from overexploitation through international trade in time to avoid the decrease of their population. This may then result in populations that are depleted to levels which would no longer allow for their use. Therefore, we cannot support this proposal to amend Resolution 924, but are open to discussing the means to provide support to parties in their effort to minimize impacts of CITES listings on livelihoods. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. European Union, I give the floor to Cuba, followed by Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos a los autores por la presentación de este documento. Cuba coincide con lo propuesto. Consideramos muy importante y justo que cuando se pretenda adoptar una propuesta de incluir una especie en CITES, se tenga en cuenta la implicación que dicha decisión tendrá para las comunidades que dependen de ellos. La relación hombre-naturaleza es de importancia capital para la conservación. Ignorarla está condenada al fracaso. Gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. I give the floor to Panama, followed by Canada.
Gracias, presidente. Estamos en la misma página que Senegal, la Unión Europea, Estados Unidos y otros. Las reglas están claras y establecen que los documentos estén públicos desde mucho tiempo de antelación. Las reglas recomiendan la consulta con las partes, no la obligan. Y cambiar eso haría el proceso mucho más burocrático, lento y a veces imposible con algunos rangos de distribución, especialmente para especies migratorias. Se realizan varias pre-crops en casi toda la región. El tema de seguridad alimentaria es increíblemente importante, pero es algo que se ve muchísimo más a nivel nacional y el tema de exportación e importación en su mayoría no ayuda a la seguridad alimentaria. Otras convenciones establecen manejo y reglamentos para el tema de la seguridad alimentaria y deben ser incorporadas al momento de implementar CITES. Como lo mencionó Estados Unidos, para la implementación hay que trabajar con todos, pero no abriendo los criterios para listar especies que en su mayoría están amenazadas o a punto de estarlo. El listado de especies similares o lookalikes es importantísimo para la implementación de CITES. Lo hace más fácil, con mejor trazabilidad y evita un vacío legal, el vacío legal que deja listar algunas que solamente son las principales. Gracias, presidente. Panamá se opone en su totalidad a estas enmiendas.
Thank you, Panama. I give the floor to Canada, followed by China.
Thank you, Chair. Canada considers livelihoods, food security, socioeconomic factors as an important part of species, wildlife, harvest and trade management, as well as important for achieving sustainable use and effective conservation outcomes. Like others, however, we recall the fundamental principles of Article 2 of the Convention, which provide direction on species to be included in Appendix 1 and 2 of the Convention. And these are biological and trade-related criteria. For this reason, Canada cannot support the document as it is currently presented, and in particular, the amendments to Annex 1 and Annex 2 of Resolution CoP 9.24, which provide those biological and trade criteria for listing on Appendix 1 or Appendix 2. Like others, we would be willing to look at approaches to achieve desired conservation outcomes and address the concerns raised in this document. While we have heard mixed views on the floor, Canada would be willing to consider the compromise approach proposed by the Secretariat in their comments, with amendments so that the consideration is of Res Conf 9.24, recognizing that the resolution also includes advice on issues such as consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I'll go to China, then Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Chair. China welcomed this document. The Conference of the Party has discussed livelihood and food security issues several times, but no significant progress has been made. We believe the way forward proposed by the proponents is instructive and will help CITES commit the contribution more to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Chair, as IBIS assessed, 70% of the world poor depends directly on wild species and their associated businesses. Uses of and trade in wild species are essential to the identities, cultural expressions, and livelihood of many indigenous people and local communities. Policy tools has been demonstrated to fail if they are not adapted to the local ecological and social context. Today, the CITES community has not embraced the importance of social-economic factors and in the protection of wildlife. Parties may find it challenging to accept the current revision, mainly due to a lack of understanding of the interaction between social-economic considerations with the protection. Time must be devoted to this critical item. China offers a compromise solution and believes this could be a fundamental practice to the technical committees of CITES. We therefore propose the following decisions.
The first decision is directed to the Animals Committee and Plants Committee, which reads 19.8a. The Animals Committee and Plants Committee, in collaboration with relevant organizations and experts, shall, little a, develop multidisciplinary guidance materials that integrate livelihoods, food security, and local knowledge into the relevant scientific decision-making framework of the Convention, including but not limited to the criteria for amendment of Appendices 1 and 2, non-detrimental findings, national quota, and review of significant trade, and little b, report the outcomes of their work to the Standing Committee. And a second decision directed to the Standing Committee, which reads 19.bb. The Standing Committee shall review the outcomes of the implementation of Decision 19.aa and make recommendations to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to address the identified challenges with the aim of considering livelihoods and food security in the decision-making framework of CITES. Given that the draft decision we have submitted is relatively substantial, we suggest that the chair establish a small drafting group to work on it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, China. I'll consider the way forward, but if you could just read your suggested draft decisions again, just one more time, so that parties and us here on the front desk also have a chance to try and capture that.
The first decision is directed to the Animals Committee and Plants Committee, which reads 19.aa. The Animals Committee and Plants Committee, in collaboration with relevant organizations and experts, shall, little a, develop multidisciplinary guidance materials that integrate livelihoods, food security, and local knowledge into the relevant scientific decision-making framework of the Convention, including but not limited to the criteria for amendment of Appendices 1 and 2, non-detriment findings, national quota, and review of significant trade. And little b, report the outcomes of their work to the Standing Committee. The second decision is directed to the Standing Committee, which reads, 19.bb, the Standing Committee shall review the outcome of the implementation of Decision 19.AA and make recommendations to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to address the identified challenges with the aim of considering livelihoods and food security in the decision-making framework of CITES. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, China. I think we've got that. I now give the floor to Burkina Faso, then Mauritania.
Ok. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Le Burkina Faso remercie les auteurs de la proposition qui ont le souci de la prise en compte des critères, des aspects socio-économiques et le partage équitable des bénéfices au niveau de la conservation. Toutefois, comme a reconnu certains partis qui nous ont précédés, l'insertion des conditions socio-économiques dans les critères d'inscription élargirait et ce qui entraverait les efforts d'inscription des espèces. C'est pourquoi le Burkina Faso ne soutient pas la proposition. Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. I give the floor to Mauritania, followed by Israel.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I want just to emphasize that Mauritania does not support the proposal in document 87.1 to amend the listing criteria. In particular, we cannot accept the suggestion that the listing criteria be amended to specify that international trade must be identified as the key driver of population loss in a species for it to qualify for listing. This would significantly undermine the treaty's conservation contribution. CITES is intended to ensure that international trade is not or does not become a factor in the decline of species. It would not matter whether it is the key factor, a partial factor, or even a possible factor. The goal is to ensure international trade is not contributing at all or will not contribute to the decline of a species. CITES is not a comprehensive conservation treaty intended to address all threats to species, but it does serve a broader conservation purpose by having the ability to take international trade out of the mix of existing and potential threats to a species. This is core strength of CITES and a rule clearly envisaged by parties in the treaty's text. The suggestion that international trade has not been a key driver, in contrary to the treaty text, and will undermine the value of the CITES treaty. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mauritania. I give the floor to Israel, followed by Niger.
Thank you, Chair. Like many of the speakers before us, such as Canada, EU, UK, United States, we understand the sentiment that is behind the proponent's document, wishing to take into account the livelihoods and food security of people who are living with and using CITES-listed species. However, like others have mentioned, this proposal goes way too far and actually is contrary to the convention itself and its definitions. We therefore cannot support the proposal and certainly don't see the point in raising a working group to deal with this in further. We believe that the issues of food security and livelihoods have already been taken care of in other resolutions. For this reason, Chair, we would propose that the draft decisions that were proposed by China and the other amendments that were proposed by Japan be dealt with in accordance with Rule 23, paragraph 6, which talks about amendments to resolutions, decisions, or other documents in that order, and that we, as a point of order, we would at this time propose under Rule 20, paragraph 2D, closure of the debate on this issue and moving to resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. So you have raised a procedural motion under 22D. So I invite, in addition to the proposal of the motion, another delegate to speak in favor of the motion, and then I will invite 2 delegates to speak against it. And of course, you're talking about the motion, not the subject of the debate. So if there is any party that wishes to speak in favor, please press the floor. Sorry, Panama, are you raising another point of order?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak in English. There was a mistake in the translations when I did my intervention, and at the end, they established that Panama is in favor of the amendments, and Panama is not in favor of the amendments. And also, they said that Panama is in favor of bad livelihoods. That's not the case. We just said that food security needs to be taken care in a local level and in other conventions, and the rules of CITES are actually completely clear on the criteria for listing. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, Panama, thank you for the record. We have that, but I'm now trying to deal with this procedural motion, and I invited parties to press the button if they wish to speak in favor of the motion proposed by Israel, and I have a number on my list, but I'll give the floor to Niger.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Donc, permettez-nous aussi de donner notre position par rapport à cet amendement. Donc, les amendements proposés dans ce document ignorent les décisions répétées.
No, Niger, we're not talking about the document now. We've had a procedural point raised by Israel under Rule 22D. And that rule, and Israel has proposed closure of the debate under that rule. We now need to resolve that. Israel have proposed it, and I am looking to see if there are any parties who wish to speak in favor of the motion proposed by Israel. Nothing else at this stage. So I do now have a number of parties on my list. I'm not sure which came first, but I see Panama, in fact. So you can have the floor. Is this on this particular point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We are in favor of the motion Israel put forward. I think we have discussed this issue in pretty quick time, almost an hour. So I think we should close it and continue with other points that needs to be made before Thursday, which is the plenary.
Thank you, Panama. So we have 2 parties in effect in favor of the motion. I'll now invite parties who wish to speak against the motion to press their button. So if you've got your button pressed now, I'm assuming you want to speak against it. So I see Botswana.
Thank you, Chair. Botswana would wish to speak against the motion as proposed by Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Botswana. I now give the floor to Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe speaks against the motion as proposed by Israel. We believe this is an important matter to us and it should be given its time to be discussed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. So I've had two parties speak in favour, two speaking against. So we need to put this immediately to a vote. So I will just get my papers in order to do that. So in preparing for this vote, I see requests for the floor, but I think we're moving into a vote now, so I'm not taking interventions. I do need to ask the European Union how your vote will be cast on this procedural motion.
It will be the member states.
Right, colleagues, we will move to a vote now. This is a vote on the procedural motion to close the debate on agenda item 87.1. The vote is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the individual member states. This is a vote on a procedural matter, so it is decided by a simple majority. If you vote yes, you are voting in favour of Israel's motion to close debate and bring it to a conclusion now. If you vote no, you are in effect looking to continue the debate. So I'll wait to get the okay from the technicians. And again, make sure all delegates are seated. I see people standing up. You need to take your seat and remain in your seat.
We are ready, Chair.
Thank you, technicians. So parties, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote and the ballot is open now. Technicians, if you could display the results on the screen. You've all got the numbers, I hope, now. Technicians, if you would display the results of parties on the screen, and I had a request in the Bureau this morning to have 2 full cycles of parties' individual votes. So we will do this. Apparently 1 full cycle didn't give people enough time to capture their information. Thank you, technicians. I think that's 2 full cycles. So we now need to bring this matter to a conclusion. Clearly, there's no consensus here on the way forward. We have the original proposal from a number of parties. We've had a couple of suggested decisions or amendments proposed by Japan and by China. And we've heard various views expressed on whether the Secretariat decisions provided a useful way forward or not. I will go back to the proponents to give them the opportunity to respond and ask what they might like to do. I think with no consensus, putting the original proposal as it stands to a vote is seems to me a way forward to resolve that issue. We then need to look at the other amendments that were proposed during the debate, and it would be useful to hear from the proponents whether they support those or not. But first, China, you are requesting the floor. Is it a procedural point? Have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not the procedure point, since it's the first time for us to really meet that rules of procedure be applied. And we just try to, we propose this compromise solution, but it was, since it was closed by the procedures, and we would like to be our drafts be noted to the summary record, and we will try to reopen it in the plenary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, China. So I think you're withdrawing your suggested amendments now. We will note them in the summary record, and you may decide to return to them in plenary. Is that correct? Yes? Okay, thank you for your cooperation. We also had an amendment from Japan, and I will, before coming back to the original proponents, I will go to Japan. During debate, I didn't hear any support for your suggested amendment, and so I'd like to ask you, Japan, what you would like to do with your suggested amendment. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to discuss this matter with Chinese proposal in the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. So we record the same conclusion, that you have withdrawn your amendment suggested here, and you might try to raise that again in the final plenary following discussions with other parties. I go back again now to any of the original proponents. There is no consensus on this document. The only solution to me seems to be to vote on it now, but I do give you the option of providing a response if you wish to do so. I see no request from the floor, so I will move to a vote on the procedure, on the document as it was originally submitted. So we're now voting on whether to adopt the amendments in the Annex 1 and Annex 2 of document 87.1. So, one moment. So European Union, again, we were just looking for how you were going to vote, but 87.1 seems to be blank. Is this another vote for the member states or for the delegation of the European Union? You have the floor.
It will be member states. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. So this is a vote on document 87.1 on the draft amendments to Resolution Conf 924 in Annex 1 and the draft decisions in Annex 2. This is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the individual member states. It is a substantive matter and therefore requires a 2/3 majority to succeed. Here, of course, if you vote yes, you're voting in favor of the original document. If you vote no, you're voting against it. So again, we'll check with the technicians, make sure everybody's seated. That's fine, and wait for the all clear.
We're prepared, Chair.
Thank you. So parties, you again have 40 seconds to cast your vote. The ballot is open now.
Delegates, we'd like to ask you to be seated during the voting, please. Please be seated.
Technicians, if you could display the results on the screen, please. This document failed to achieve a 2/3 majority, and so this committee does not recommend its adoption to the final plenary. If you've all had chance to capture the details of the vote, then we can show the individual results of parties on the screen. Thank you. I think that's a complete second cycle, so we can now move on with our agenda. The next item we want to discuss is item 72 on African lions, and I'm going to invite the Secretariat to introduce this. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you all. Chair, this document has been prepared by the Secretariat in consultation with the Chair of the Standing Committee, and it covers the reporting obligations of both the Secretariat and the Standing Committee on the implementation of a suite of decisions related to African lions arising from CoP18. I should stress that aspects of these decisions related to the CITES Big Cat Task Force are dealt with under a different document, CoP19 Doc 67. The Secretariat has received some funding to implement certain of the activities referred to in Decision 18244 from the European Union, Switzerland and the United States, and we offer our grateful thanks to those parties for their support. These activities are described in paragraphs 5 to 10 of the document. We've begun discussions with contractors, and our intention is to place some options before the planned meeting of the African Carnivores Initiative in April next year to ensure that the priorities are agreed by range states. Concerning Decision 18246, we're grateful to the Netherlands and the United Kingdom for the funding to commission research and analysis on the legal and illegal trade in lions and other big cats. The resulting report was placed before the Standing Committee, and it's expected that relevant parts of it will be referred to the Big Cat Task Force for its consideration. And as I said, there's more details in document COP19 Doc 67. Some of the other activities in Decision 18.246 could not be undertaken due to a lack of external funding. In particular, the development of guidance materials and forensic-type techniques for the identification of lions and other big cats. Chair, we've not made as much progress on the implementation of these decisions as we would have liked, and we therefore, the Standing Committee Chair and the Secretariat, propose that the decisions are recast for continuation after COP19. And you can find the text of these suggested revised decisions in Annex 1 of this document, indicating the changes that are made to the existing decisions. In summary, Chair, we ask this committee to note the present document and to adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1 of the document, and consequently to delete decisions 18244, 18246, 18247, 18249 and 1850, which will have been superseded by the new decisions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I moved to open the floor to comments from parties on, as the Secretariat said, the draft decisions in Annex 1, and of course the recommended proposed deletions if we adopt the annex. We've lost quite a lot of time, and I would ask you to keep your comments as brief as possible. I hope we can adopt these draft decisions without a very long debate. So if you're content with them, then I will take silence as being approval. So you only need really to raise the floor if you want to propose some changes or amendments or make any specific comments. But please keep your focus on the issues that are under consideration and rather than any broader issues. So with that, I give the floor to Uganda, followed by the United States.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Uganda would like to thank the Secretariat for this document. Chair, Uganda did host the African Lion Range State in 2016. Over 28 countries did attend, and we agreed on a host of interventions to save the lion. I know it's taken some time since then, and we feel the proposed decisions are quite important, and we need to move fast and implement. We therefore support the proposed amendments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. And for being brief, United States of America, followed by United Republic of Tanzania.
Thank you, Chair. The United States thanks the Secretariat for its report and generally supports the recommendations of COP19 Doc 72, in particular the renewal of the decisions as outlined in Annex 1. Conservation of lions is a very important issue to the United States, in particular the careful consideration of analyses of the legal and illegal trade in lions to better understand trends and linkages between trade in different species, especially tigers, and the commodities in trade which contain or claim to contain such specimens. The importance of this issue is highlighted by our contributions to implement the current decisions. We believe the value of these renewed decisions will further be enhanced by ensuring that relevant information is conveyed to the CITES Big Cats Task Force, Standing Committee, and Animals Committee by the Secretariat in a timely manner and usable format. Accordingly, we do not support the deletion of the review by the Animals Committee of the report analyzing the legal and illegal trade in lions as called for in Decision 18.246. Although much of the information called for in this decision has been incorporated into the terms of reference and modus operandi for the CITES Big Cats Task Force, the report should still be made available for review by the Animals Committee. We recommend an additional decision to retain this review by the Animals Committee and to direct the Secretariat as follows. 19.EE, the Secretariat shall A, share relevant information generated through the implementation of Decision 19.DD with the CITES Big Cats Task Force, Standing Committee, or both as appropriate, and B, report on the implementation of the previous Decision 18.246 to the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee. Thank you, Chair.
United States, could we have that one more time, please? Perhaps a little bit more slowly. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. 19.EE, the Secretariat shall, little a, share relevant information generated through the implementation of Decision 19.DD with the CITES Big Cats Task Force, Standing Committee, or both as appropriate, and little b, report on the implementation of the previous Decision 18.246 to the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee.
Thank you, United States. We've got that now, so we give the floor to Tanzania, followed by Mali.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania welcomes document COP19 Doc 72, prepared by the Secretariat in consultation with the Chair of the Standing Committee. Chair, Tanzania, the lion range state with the largest population of African lion, has remained committed to lion conservation. Chair, however, habitat loss, decline in prey base, increase in human-wildlife conflict, particularly retaliatory killings, has continued to affect conservation of this apex carnivore. Chair, Tanzania commends the work done by the Secretariat in implementation of Decision 18.246. However, we note with concern the financial and time because of COVID constraints that have hindered the full implementation of Decision 18.244, 18.47, 18.49, and 18.520. Chair, the implementation of Decision 18.44E has created diverging opinion among lion range states, and most of their concerns were not adequately integrated in draft guidelines for conservation of African lions. Noting the need to continue the work on the lion conservation, Chair, Tanzania supports the draft decision to renew decision 18.244, 18.247, 18.249, and 18.250, and delete decision 18.246. Thank you, Chair. I submit.
Thank you, Tanzania. I give the floor to Mali, followed by Liberia.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Comme nous le savons tous aujourd'hui, la situation des grands félins dans nos pays, surtout en Afrique de l'Ouest, où les habitats sont aujourd'hui très généralement convoités par les populations, sinon les communautés riveraines. Les populations lions dans notre pays ont considérablement chuté du fait des différents conflits entre les lions et les transhumants, qui généralement protègent plutôt leurs animaux au détriment de l'occupation de l'espèce lion. J'ai fait une dernière mission tout de suite en début du mois d'octobre dans la zone de la région de Caille, qui est l'ouest du Mali, qui fait frontière avec la République de Guinée et la République du Sénégal. Ce sont ces deux pays qui ont en partage une relique de population de lions dans ses limites. Aujourd'hui, il y a une crainte considérable de la disparition de cette espèce. Du coup, je remercie ici la Fondation France Vivert, également Born Free, qui nous avait saisi justement pour leur donner la situation de l'état des populations de lions dans nos pays. Ce qui est sûr, c'est dans l'optique de pouvoir nous aider. Mais nous nous penchons surtout du côté de la CITES pour que, avec toute votre indulgence, que vous puissiez voir ce qui se passe dans nos pays aujourd'hui pour qu'on puisse faire la restauration de cette espèce. Les activités de sensibilisation se font aujourd'hui par plusieurs ONG au niveau du Mali, à la frontière de ces aires protégées. Donc, du coup, le Mali soutient avec force ce document qui est proposé ici avec les amendements qui seront pris en compte. Monsieur le Président, je vous prie de pouvoir bien vraiment garder ça à l'esprit que les lions aujourd'hui, si nous ne faisons pas attention, vont disparaître carrément entre les différents pays qui ont en partage cette espèce. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mali. I give the floor to Liberia, followed by Zimbabwe. And again, I ask people to focus on the draft decisions in the annex and whether these are acceptable to you or not. Liberia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Liberia joined all of the previous speakers to appreciate and thank the Secretariat for presenting this document, Document 72, and we also wholeheartedly support the amendment to the annex. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I give the floor now to Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe takes note of the report by the Standing Committee in consultation with the Chair of the Animals Committee. Zimbabwe supports the draft decisions by the CITES Secretariat with amendments as proposed by the USA. Lions are a key species and funds need to be availed to ensure that range states meet to discuss issues to do with species management and habitat threats so that we ensure the conservation of lions in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. I give the floor now to the European Union, followed by Niger.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states thank the Secretariat for preparing this document. We support the adoption of the newly drafted decisions 19AA to 19EE. On a general note, considering the importance of cooperation, we see merit in creating a mechanism to inform and strengthen the work of the CITES Big Cat Task Force on gained insights as appropriate. For example, on the work done in relation to Decision 19DD. The EU and its member states also support to have the outcomes of the research and analysis of decision 18.246A be reviewed by the Animals Committee next to making it available for consideration by the CITES Big Cat Task Force. Thank you.
Thank you. European Union, I give the floor to Niger, followed by Nigeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. L'inventaire des lions dans le complexe WAP partagé entre le Burkina Faso, le Bénin et le Niger a montré la baisse de l'effectif de cette population qui subit une menace croissante. C'est pourquoi aujourd'hui les États membres de ce complexe sollicitent la mobilisation des ressources additionnelles pour permettre justement de faire des investigations aussi bien en termes d'études qualitatives et quantitatives pour apprécier davantage les effectifs dans les zones tampons et les autres sites potentiels. Donc le Niger soutient en tout cas cette proposition. Merci.
Thank you. Niger, I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The population of lions in Nigeria has drastically reduced, and therefore there's need to redeem this situation. We need to take action to prevent them from extinction. Nigeria therefore supports the draft to the annex as proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria, and for being brief, I give the floor now to Senegal, followed by Somalia.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Donc, tout d'abord, le lion, c'est l'emblème national du Sénégal, pour montrer tout simplement l'importance que cette espèce revêt pour le Sénégal. Mais actuellement, la population est dans une situation qui nécessite vraiment des efforts énormes pour la conserver à l'état naturel. Pour dire tout simplement que la population a une taille actuellement très réduite. Donc, par rapport à ce document, donc, le Sénégal vraiment appuie les propositions qui sont formulées, les amendements de 19AA à 19E. Nous sommes en phase avec ces projets. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Senegal. And I've got 4 parties on my list now, and I'm going to close the list there. But I would also ask those parties, in the interest of time, that if all they want to say is that they are in favor of the draft decisions, then I'm going to take that, with or without the amendments, that I'm going to take silence as consent as a way forward. But I see Somalia, followed by Togo.
Thank you, Chair, to give me the floor. Somalia is a range state for lions. We believe there is a population decline in Somalia. We consider this document is important, and we support the document 72 to conserve the lion. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. And for being brief, I give the floor to Togo, then Ghana.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Au Togo, l'espèce a pratiquement disparu. Il a fallu une dernière étude. Et juste avec les caméras trappes qu'on a pu encore avoir les indices de ces espèces. Donc nous soutenons fermement cette proposition qui va améliorer l'existence de l'espèce des félins, les grands félins. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Togo. Ghana, then the Congo, and that concludes the list of parties.
Ghana is also a range state of the African lions, and we deem the amendment to the proposal as very appropriate, and it's for the good of the global conservation of the African lion, and so we do unreservedly support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Ghana, I give the floor to the Congo.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Le Congo n'est plus un État de l'ère de répartition. C'est un véritable regret et donc nous soutenons cette proposition. Merci.
Thank you, the Congo. I now move on, and there are no more parties requesting the floor, so I can see a way forward, but this is a topic of wide interest, I know, so I will see if there are any requests for the floor from observers. See. Okay, I give the floor to the Convention on Migratory Species.
Thank you, Chair. As you requested, we will be very specific in our comments, only focusing on the decisions before us. Regarding Decision 19 AA Para A, we are cooperating under the ACI with the IUCN CAT Specialist Group in preparing a strategic plan to restore the Central and West African lion populations. And a part of this plan will also touch upon trade, but as the title suggests, it is a much broader approach and will also address the concerns that have been raised by several West African states in this committee. And a draft of this plan is envisaged to be discussed at the second ACI Range State meeting, which Uganda kindly offered to host in April 2023. Regarding Decision 19 AAC, we'd like to remind again of the Range State meeting and the opportunity to integrate a capacity building workshop for relevant regions in this meeting. This will, of course, depend on the availability of extra budgetary funds to prepare the foreseen technical guidance study. Regarding Tanzania's comment on the guidelines for the conservation of lions in Africa, again, the Range State meeting will provide an opportunity for further consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, Convention on Migratory Species. I'll now give the floor to Humane Society International, followed by Conservation Force, and then conclude then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of Humane Society International, Born Free Foundation, and 14 additional observers whose name will be provided to you in writing. We note that the report on the legal and illegal trade in lions and other big cats mandated by Decision 18.246A was not completed in time for review by the Animals and Standing Committees. Decisions 18.247 and 18.248 should therefore be updated to ensure that these committees can consider the report and make recommendations. Deletion of Decision 18.246B would curtail assessment of whether trade in lion specimens reported under Purpose Code H follows the guidance in Resolution Conf 12.3, Revision CoP18. This decision should be retained. We support the adoption of the new draft decisions 19.AA to EE with a recommendation that the words, quote, such as lion hunting, end quote, be deleted from draft decision 19.AAB since it is inappropriate to highlight one management practice over others. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, HSI. I give the floor now to Conservation Force.
Thank you very much, Chair. We attach a lot of interest to this topic of the species, where we are doing considerable investment in implementing and assisting in the implementation of conservation actions. Chair, I would like to briefly comment only on one particular decision, which is Decision 19DD, because I would like to advise and to recommend the addition here of action aimed at the drafting of management plans for the species. We know that most Southern African, if not all Southern African countries have proper management plans. We would like to see the same thing in other range states. So we believe that a good addition to the decision directed to parties would be a new letter E, which is a draft and implement management plan based of common international standards or something along this language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Conservation Force, if you just give me a minute to make sure I've captured everything I need to from the debate. Okay, thank you, colleagues. So I think with that we can conclude that we note the report, we adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1 with the amendments proposed by the United States, which have been supported by other parties, and we delete decisions 18244, 246, 247, 249 and 250. So with that, give me a second, then we will move on to our next agenda item. We now are considering document 76 on Saiga antelope. This document is submitted by the Standing Committee, but I believe is going to be introduced by the Chair of the Animals Committee. So I give Switzerland the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I present this document on behalf of the Standing Committee. At CoP18, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18270 to 18274 on Saiga antelope. They were directed to the range states, Secretariat, the Animals Committee, the Standing Committee, as well as to parties and various stakeholders. The decisions directed the range countries to implement the measures directed to them in the medium-term international work program for the Saiga antelope, encourages them to establish internal market controls and inform the Secretariat about such measures. The Secretariat was tasked to, in collaboration with CMS, to provide inputs to the development of the next MTIWP 2020-25 and to review the conservation of and trade in Saiga antelope based on available data on legal and illegal trade, materials and outcomes of the fourth meeting of Saiga MOU signatories. It should also consult with Saiga range states and major trading and consumer states concerning their management of stockpiles of Saiga specimens. And finally, report any findings and recommendations to the Animals Committee and to the Standing Committee. The Animals Committee and Standing Committee shall consequently review these reports and make recommendations to the COP as appropriate. The Secretariat reported that in relation to stockpiles management, it had received responses from China, Hong Kong, SAR, and Japan. The Secretariat and CMS organized technical workshop was held in September 2021. This meeting considered inter alia an overview report on the conservation status of Saiga antelopes and the implementation of the Saiga MOU. Despite the largely positive developments of the populations of Saiga antelope, there is still concern about the long-term survival of the species. This is mainly due to possible human-wildlife conflicts, barriers to the movements of this highly migratory species, disease outbreaks, as well as poaching for illegal trade in parts of Saiga antelopes. Summaries of all these activities were presented to AC and Standing Committee, which both proposed the extension with slight amendments of the decisions discussed above. The Conference of the Parties is therefore invited to adopt the draft decisions presented in Annex 1 to this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, for your introduction. And with that, I open the floor to parties. I see the United States of America, followed by Mali.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States supports adoption of the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to document CoP19, document 76. We are pleased to share that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recently awarded over $3 million to 6 projects focused on addressing the poaching and trafficking of Saiga antelope. The United States remains particularly concerned about the status of stockpiles and effective management and monitoring of them. As we have noted previously, the range states of Saiga territory stopped commercial exports of specimens of Saiga antelope around 2005. So all international trade in Saiga specimens should be from stockpiles existing prior to 2005. Commercial exports are now further prohibited pursuant to the annotation adopted at COP18. Accordingly, any re-exports of Saiga specimens from any lawful stockpiles require evidence of lawful CITES trade in the specimen prior to 2005. The Secretariat's suggested edits to draft decision 19 Big B, Little b, and its tentative budget included in Annex 2 to document COP19 Doc 76 seem to imply that the assessment of Saiga specimen stockpiles is to be undertaken upon requests by a party. We seek clarification that the stockpile assessment should be interpreted as an instruction to the Secretariat in these decisions. And lastly, in Document 76, the Secretariat notes that the annotation applies to exports of Saiga specimens of wild origin for commercial purposes, taking place under the provisions of Article 4, paragraphs 2 and 3 of the Convention. It does not apply to re-exports of specimens of Saiga under the provisions of Article 4, paragraphs 4 and 5, which can continue for commercial or non-commercial purposes. While those statements are correct, the Secretariat failed to note that without evidence of lawful prior CITES trade, including export prior to the enactment of the zero export quota annotation, and importantly prior to the end of commercial exports by range states in 2005, the re-export would not be lawful under CITES. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, United States. I give the floor to Mali.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Vous m'excusez du terme. Écoutez, la Saiga, c'est une belle antilope, très belle antilope, à l'image comme les chèvres chez nous, dans le Sahel. Et les communautés qui élèvent cette espèce ont plusieurs avantages dans le cadre de l'élevage de cette espèce. Qu'est-ce qui a été remarqué dans ces dernières années? La pression extrêmement forte sur le capital. Du coup, ce qui va engendrer un jour la disparition de cette espèce. Monsieur le Président, ici à ces États, surtout les États de l'ère de répartition, de prendre des dispositions pour essayer de faire au moins un contrôle strict des marchés intérieurs, ce qui ferait en tout cas moins de pression et moins de braconnage, surtout sur l'espèce taïga. Donc, nous soutenons justement les propositions qui sont faites et les amendements en question. Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Molly. I see no further requests on the floor from parties, so I will invite observers. Are there any comments? Okay, I see the Convention on Migratory Species. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Saiga antelope is another species included in the CMS CITES joint work program and an example of where the two conventions have been working in complementarity, thereby creating synergies. Therefore, we thank the CITES Secretariat for preparing the comprehensive report before us. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Germany for the generous funding provided to convene the technical workshop to prepare the medium-term international work program for 2021 to 2025 in 2019, but also an overview report on the conservation status of Saiga, as well as a feasibility study for sustainable use of Saiga antelope, all of which were adopted by the signatories of the CMS MOU at its fourth meeting convened online in September 2021. We are also thankful to the US Fish and Wildlife Service for providing funds, as mentioned by the delegation just a few minutes ago, which will help implementing several aspects of the medium-term international work program. We would also like to take this opportunity to report on an urgent request received from Kazakhstan, where over 97% of Saiga tatarica is found, for the assistance in developing a strategy for the sustainable conservation and management of its Saiga population, which after the mass die-off in 2015 due to a major pasteurellosis outbreak caused by unfavorable climatic conditions, experienced an annual increase, including a 40% increase between 2021 to 2022. The rural population of Kazakhstan has now reached over 800,000 individuals, the largest number ever recorded for this population. This has led to crop raiding by Saiga herds of the rural population and competition for pasture with livestock, leading to an exacerbation of human-wildlife conflict. Against this background, the government of Kazakhstan has reached out to the CMS and CITES secretariats, seeking assistance in developing sustainable management measures through consultations with international experts in order to address the acute problem of damage to agriculture and contribute to the development of a long-term strategy for population management. We support the draft decisions contained in the document before us and look forward to working with Saiga range states, major trading and consumer states, and other stakeholders to jointly implement the medium-term international work program for the Saiga antelope. Thank you.
Thank you. Convention on Migratory Species. I now give the floor to Fauna Flora International.
Thank you, Chair. We are making this intervention also on behalf of EIA and Traffic. Broadly, we too welcome the draft decisions here. We are encouraged by the growth in Saiga populations in the years following the 2015 mass die-off of Saiga in Kazakhstan. However, together with our local partners who work on Saiga conservation on the ground, we remain concerned about the ongoing pressures facing the Saiga antelope, for example, from poaching and illegal trade. Indeed, just this month, more than 200 kilograms of Saiga horn have been seized in Kazakhstan. Notably, there has been little progress made on the issue of robust management of stockpiles of Saiga specimens, with few important range, consumer and trade countries sharing relevant information on their implementation of Decision 18.270 regarding their management of stockpiles. So, while we welcome the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 of CoP19 Doc 76, we note that Decision 19AA, paragraph B, is currently only specifically directed to Saiga range states, omitting consumer and trading countries. This omission is inconsistent with the intent of the decision to involve range, transit and consumer countries, as well as in the medium-term international work plan for Saiga antelope for 2021 to 25 that calls on market controls for these countries. The omission would further hamper conservation efforts and impede the overall effective implementation of this decision, particularly where reporting on stocks has already been limited in consumer and trading countries. We therefore encourage parties to amend paragraph B of draft decision 19AA to include Saiga, transit and consumer states to report on Saiga stockpile management, in addition to reporting by Saiga range states. We further encourage cross-border cooperation and encourage parties with expertise and knowledge in the management of their stocks to share their experience to strengthen and enrich this process. And we note that Traffic is collaborating with the Government of Malaysia regarding Saiga stockpile management and would welcome the opportunity to work with other important consumer and trade countries in this regard. Finally, continued engagement with traditional medicine practitioners and consumers, along with initiatives to address demand from illegally sourced products, is also important, and we stand ready to work with parties to implement this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fauna and Flora International. With no further requests from the floor, I can bring this item to a conclusion. I've heard support for the draft decisions in Annex 1. I think the intervention from the US indicated you didn't support the Secretariat amendment, so I think we go forward with Annex 1 as it stands at the moment. We also need, I think, to delete decisions 18270 to 18274, which would be superseded by this current suggested draft decision. So with that, I close this particular agenda item, and we have adopted the draft decisions in the annex as a recommendation to the plenary. So we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is on item 58, West African vultures. This document has been submitted by the Standing Committee in consultation with the Secretariat, and I believe the Secretariat are going to introduce this. Yes. You have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Yes, the Secretariat is introducing this document at the request of the Standing Committee. At CoP18, a suite of decisions on West African vultures was adopted by the Conference of the Parties, and amongst these was an instruction to the Standing Committee in consultation with the Secretariat to report on the activities which took place under these decisions to the present meeting. In this document, you can find a report of the activities which took place under these decisions. The Animals Committee was particularly active on these matters and submitted a significant number of new draft decisions to the Standing Committee for its consideration. The Standing Committee agreed to submit these draft decisions to the present meeting, and you can find them in Annex 1 of the document. The Secretariat has examined these draft decisions carefully and, particularly in view of their length and complexity, considers that there may be scope for streamlining them without diminishing their effectiveness. You can find our suggestions in paragraphs D and E of the Secretariat's comments. We've explained the reasons for each of the change that we propose. In the interests of time, I won't repeat them, but I hope that they are clear. Just like to point out one typographical error in draft decision 19DD paragraph C. It's on page 9 in the English version. In paragraph C of draft decision 19DD, on that page. The Animals Committee should be requested to provide scientific advice and guidance to the Standing Committee and not to the Secretariat, so our apologies for that. Chair, the proposal submitted to the Conference of Parties by the Standing Committee is to adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1 of Document 58 and to delete decisions 18186 to 18192, which would be replaced by the new decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And I open the floor for comments by parties, and I invite you to focus, as always, on the request in front of us to review the draft decisions in Annex 1, and you may also wish to take account of the Secretariat comments in paragraphs D and E of their remarks. So with that, I open the floor, and I see Marley. You have the floor.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Comme je l'ai souligné par rapport au lion, c'est la même situation qu'au niveau de ces grands oiseaux. Aujourd'hui, les habitats de ces animaux ou de ces oiseaux sont en train de partir parce qu'il y a ce qu'on appelle aujourd'hui dans mon pays le problème d'orpaillage. Les mines qui sont partout, surtout les mines traditionnelles. Alors ces espèces qui ont aussi l'avantage de rester dans leur habitat sont actuellement en déperdition totale. On a fait un inventaire des vautours entre le Mali et le Burkina en allant justement vers la région de Gao. Lorsqu'il y avait plein de vautours sur cette ligne, c'était les grands camions, les cars et autres là qui étaient sur le chemin. Aujourd'hui, c'est aussi des bergers qui utilisent la strychnine, souvent pour éteindre ces animaux, ces oiseaux, je veux dire toujours. Donc, c'est le lieu. Pour nous qui sommes de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, notamment, notre pays, notre voisin, le Burkina Faso, le Sénégal, le Niger, qu'on puisse se donner, et la Guinée bien sûr, se donner la main pour qu'on puisse vraiment faire en sorte qu'on trouve une solution idoine pour la préservation de ces oiseaux. Et cela ne pourrait jamais se faire, Monsieur le Président, si la CITES, aussi la CMS, ne viennent pas à notre appui. Donc pour ce faire, nous soutenons justement cette proposition et les amendements qui seront faits. Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Marley. I give the floor now to Niger, followed by the United States.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La population des vautours, de façon globale, subissent une dégradation très prononcée de leur habitat, eu égard à tout le rôle écologique que joue cette population de vautours. Et nous avons justement, nous tenons à vous préciser que des études bien documentées à travers des ONG internationales nous ont aidés à avoir des données fiables qui montrent effectivement le déclin de ces espèces de façon générale par rapport non seulement à la dégradation de l'habitat, à l'utilisation des spécimens pour la pharmacopée et pour l'utilisation traditionnelle. Donc, par rapport à cette situation, le Niger soutient vraiment cette proposition et demande aux autres États de la soutenir de façon, en tout cas, globale. Merci.
Thank you, Niger. I give the floor to the United States, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States aligns itself with the comments made by Mali and Niger. We support the Standing Committee's recommendation to adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to Document 58, as well as the deletion of decisions 18.186 to 18.192 as these decisions have now been fully implemented. However, with the exception of the technical edit in 19BB little a to correct the title of the instrument, the United States does not support the recommendations of the Secretariat to adopt the draft decisions with the amendments proposed in paragraph D of document 58. Although the Secretariat states that the proposed amendments ensure the draft decisions are precise and targeted to deliver tangible results, the United States believes that the draft decisions should remain as proposed by the Standing Committee. These draft decisions were developed by the working group and adopted by the Animals Committee at AC 31, and then considered and endorsed by the Standing Committee at SC 74 for submission to CoP19. As these decisions were carefully drafted and recommended through the committee process, we do not feel there is a need for the Secretariat's proposed revisions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. United States, I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recognizing the growing evidence of significant cross-border trade in vulture parts among West African countries, requiring of urgent action, the Nigerian government hosted a recent workshop to drive development of a West African vulture action plan. This plan uses the CMS Vulture Multi-Species Action Plan and the CITES decision as its own basis. To ensure cross-party support, this workshop involved participants from 13 different countries, including CITES and CMS national focal points, ECOWAS and other government representatives, academics, and NGO experts. A final version will be ready by mid-December and be submitted as an information document. And therefore, Nigeria support this document in totality and urge other parties to please support. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigeria, I give the floor to Senegal, followed by the European Union.
Voilà, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Donc, les vautours sont des espèces essentielles pour l'environnement. Les vautours, quand on voit les rôles qu'ils jouent au niveau de l'environnement, on sait que pertinemment que c'est des espèces à protéger. Donc, le Sénégal a compris très vite. C'est pourquoi cette espèce est intégralement protégée au Sénégal, compte tenu de son rôle écologique. Parce que c'est un nettoyeur de l'environnement. Rappelons que sans les vautours, il y aurait des maladies qui auraient proliféré pour vraiment décimer la race humaine. Donc, les vautours actuellement subissent une grande pression de multiformes. D'abord, il y a les changements climatiques qui sont là, qui sont en train d'anéantir l'habitat du vautour avec la destruction des grands arbres qui servent de support pour les vautours. À cela s'ajoute la pression anthropique, donc liée souvent à la chasse illégale, au commerce donc illégal, ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui, les vautours sont très, très vulnérables et la population est devenue très réduite. C'est pourquoi nous sommes en phase avec ces projets de décision soumis donc, présentement. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. Vultures have a crucial role in the functioning of healthy ecosystems. Most vulture species have been recently facing an extremely rapid population decline in Asia, resulting from the poisoning by the veterinary drug diclofenac. Diclofenac also poses a threat to African vulture populations. However, the cause of the decline in Africa is also illegal domestic and also international trade. Deliberate poisoning to prevent vultures drawing attention to poaching activities has also been documented. The EU and its member states arrange countries for one of the species listed in the document, the Egyptian vulture, and are fully aware of the need to protect vultures throughout their range. To maintain population of these key species, it is essential that parties, West African range states, relevant intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations supported by the Secretariat, the animals and the standing committees work closely together to protect them. The EU therefore welcomes and thanks to the Standing Committee for the preparation of the document and fully supports the adoption of the suggested decisions. As regards the proposed amendments by the Secretariat, we are concerned by the lack of time to consider all these amendments. Therefore, like the United States, we also prefer to keep the original text as agreed by the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. European Union, I give the floor to Burkina Faso, then Ghana.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Burkina Faso fait effectivement partie de l'aide de répartition de vautours. Et aussi, au niveau du Burkina Faso, les vautours subissent beaucoup de pression. En plus de ce que le Sénégal a pu nous informer ici, il y a les empoisonnements directs comme indirects qui font beaucoup de ravages au niveau de la population des vautours. Une étude menée en 2021 montrait que le Monarchus était en déclin de 2 individus aux 5 km sur 5 km. C'est-à-dire que l'étude a pu observer 3 individus sur 5 km en 2021, alors que Thiolé observait 6 individus aux 5 km en 2004. Ce qui montre réellement le déclin de la population de vautours. Donc le Burkina ne peut que soutenir cette proposition. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Burkina Faso, I give the floor to Ghana, followed by Benin, followed by Burundi, and that's the end of the list of parties. So Ghana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And then Ghana, just like the other range states who have also given their submission, are greatly concerned with the eradication of the vultures. And then we were part of the meeting that held in Abuja to look for ways in conserving the vultures, especially as we know trade in this species across the West African sub-region is gradually leading to the eradication of the species. We wholly support the submission by the Standing Committee to see to the conservation of this particular species, which is very, very important as far as cleaning of the environment is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. I give the floor to Benin, then Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Les populations de vautours ont été décimées, victimes d'une croyance populaire qui les prenait comme des espèces de mauvais augure. Actuellement, le commerce traditionnel et aussi le commerce international des produits de vautours ne font que croître et font peser un risque d'interdiction sur l'espèce. C'est pour ça que le Bénin soutient la proposition faite par le secrétariat et invite les autres parties à appuyer cette proposition. Merci.
Thank you, Baran. I give the floor to Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Burundi intervient pour soutenir la proposition soumise par le secrétariat, vu que la population des vautours est en voie de disparition. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. And that concludes the list of parties. So I will again see if there are any observers who wish to comment. Okay, I see the Convention on Migratory Species have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The CMS Secretariat welcomes the draft decisions agreed by the Standing Committee on West African vultures, which is also one of the species contained in the CMS CITES Joint Work Programme. We also support the proposed amendments by the Secretariat. The actions proposed are in line with those identified in the CMS Vulture Multi-Species Action Plan and therefore reinforce an existing infrastructure of policies and commitments by parties, range states, and NGOs. There is an urgent need for actions to address the trade and its motivations, improve the preparedness of authorities to deal with poisoning events, and properly enforce existing legislations through appropriate police investigations and prosecutions. There is evidence, as per the UNEP WCMC 2021 report, West African Vultures, a review of trade and sentinel poisoning, that unreported international trade is taking place in the region, and there's a consensus among the experts that vulture populations are declining and that trade is probably its main driver. CMS is not only providing guidance and an institutional framework, but also supporting actions on the ground and conservation planning. CMS has supported a training mission to Guinea-Bissau to enhance the local preparedness to counteract the ongoing poisoning incidents and the development of an action plan for the conservation of vultures in that country. Vulture experts and governments have joined forces with the support of CMS in Nigeria in October 2022 to develop a West Africa vulture conservation strategy that will be finalized in early 2023 and will further guide the conservation actions in the region, as already mentioned by the government of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Convention on Migratory Species. I give the floor to Humane Society International, and that concludes a list of observers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Humane Society International was a member of the working group on this issue, and we strongly support the recommendations that have been contained in this document. We would note that the decline of vultures has been a massive and serious problem across not only West Africa, but much of Africa and Asia, and that in Africa there has been quite a bit of evidence of international trade and also domestic trade for traditional belief-based use. One study published in 2021 in Nigeria found that there was a massive trade, I'm quoting from the abstract, in vulture parts for belief-based use. There was also a belief that vultures are evil, and hence they were often persecuted on sight. So vultures are being affected by a wide range of factors, including international trade, and we strongly support whatever protection CITES can provide them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Humane Society International. So we've had a fairly good debate on that. There's clearly a lot of support for the decisions in Annex 1 as originally submitted by the Standing Committee, but with the minor edit, I think, from the Secretariat. Okay, so with the minor edit in 19 BBA to make sure we get the correct title of the instrument. There is also support, and it's necessary, of course, to delete decisions 18.186 to 192. And with that, I conclude we adopt those draft decisions as a recommendation to the final plenary, and we can close this item. We then move on to our next agenda item, which is item 74, document 74, which is on songbird trade and conservation management. This document has been submitted by the Animals Committee and will be introduced by their chair, and I give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. At CoP18, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18256 to 18259 on songbird trade and conservation management. They were directed to the Secretariat, the Animals Committee, the Standing Committee, as well as parties and various stakeholders. The decisions directed the Secretariat to commission a study on the scale and scope of international songbird trade, to consider the management and conservation priorities of songbird taxa involved in such trade, and consult with appropriate technical experts in the preparation of documents on the conservation, trade, management, enforcement, and regulatory priorities of the songbird taxa identified. It was also tasked to convene a technical workshop to consider these findings and submit the findings of this workshop as well as the study and additional information to the Animals Committee for its consideration. The Animals Committee and Standing Committee should then consequently review these results and make recommendations to COP as appropriate. Due to the lack of funding, the main tasks of the decisions could not be completed for consideration by the two committees. However, the committees were informed about partial funding by the United States, as well as of an initiative by the NGO Species 360 that, in collaboration with the University of Denmark, elaborated an analysis of songbird trade and conservation, which can make a valuable contribution to the study to be completed. In addition, a parallel initiative by BirdLife, Traffic, IUCN, UNEP, WCMC, and the University of Cambridge, which carries out a quantitative review of global trade in wild birds, may also contribute to the aims of the decisions above. In light of these initiatives and the progress noted, the Animals Committee therefore proposes the extension of the decision mentioned above. And the Conference of the Parties is therefore invited to renew the decisions 18256 to 18259 presented in Annex 1 of this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, and note the request to, or the proposal to renew the decisions in Annex 1. So I open the floor for comments by parties. So I give the floor to Mali, followed by the United States.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Encore une fois, je vous remercie de m'avoir donné la parole par rapport à une situation aussi importante quand il s'agit de la distribution des oiseaux dans mon pays. Je suis entre plusieurs écosystèmes. Par contre, les espèces concernées sont de la savane, une partie de la forêt, se trouve aujourd'hui très menacée aussi. La pression est très forte. La concurrence s'abat entre ces oiseaux et les communautés, surtout au moment où il y a les plantes, où il y a les cultures qui sont en maturité. Également, il y a des opérateurs, des oiseauliers, comme on peut le dire. C'est une activité aussi à leur niveau pour pouvoir se nourrir. Monsieur le Président, nous avons une division qui s'occupe justement de tous les aspects de la CITES. Le point focal est là, il est au niveau de notre comité. Et ici, aujourd'hui, de pouvoir prendre des décisions pour nous aider. Nous en avons besoin. Et en son temps, on a eu un atelier à Dakar où on a profité de certaines formations, mais il se trouve aujourd'hui que les cadres ne sont plus formés. Les anciens qui étaient là, ils sont partis, les nouveaux sont là, ils ne sont pas équipés, ils ont besoin de soutien. Et toujours, nous nous appuyons sur vous, Monsieur le Président, avec le comité permanent, le comité des animaux surtout, pour que vous puissiez venir en appui à notre pays pour qu'on puisse avoir, en tout cas, toutes les capacités pour pouvoir soutenir nos enfants. Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Marley. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States supports renewing decisions 18.256 to 18.259 on songbird trade and conservation management as presented in Annex 1. Because the Secretariat has been unable to initiate all of the work called for in Decision 18.256, we believe that the decisions should be extended to the next intersessional period between COP19 and COP20. And as the Animals Committee Chair has mentioned, the United States will be able to provide funding for this work with a focus on the Western Hemisphere songbird species. We appreciate the actions taken by the Secretariat towards implementing Decision 18.256. The U.S. strongly supports these decisions, as we are very concerned about the illegal and unsustainable legal trade in songbirds, resulting in global declines of songbird populations, many at dramatically rates. In addition, the U.S. supports the Secretariat's view that the research initiatives mentioned in paragraphs 5, 6, and 7 of this document have recently been undertaken or are currently underway, could greatly contribute to or form the basis for the study and consultations that the Secretariat is to undertake, and may provide valuable information for the technical workshop once convened. Therefore, it is ideal to consider this work when the Secretariat makes recommendations to the Animals Committee on Decision 18.256, paragraph E. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United States. I give the floor to Malaysia, then the European Union, and that concludes the list of parties.
Thank you, Chair. Malaysia welcomes the attention and priorities regarding songbird trade and conservation management, and Malaysia support the recommendations to renew decisions 18.256 to 18.258 as presented in Annex 1. The study identified in renewed decisions will be valuable in ensuring that we have robust information at the global level to make informed science-based decisions at CITES, especially to evaluate the conservation and management needs of songbirds. Malaysia encouraged parties and songbird conservation and trade community to undertake this research on the scale and scope of the international songbird trade as well as its supply chains, including the online trade. Importantly, we emphasize the need for this study to be global in its coverage rather than being focused on specific regions or sub-regions. We support the intervention of the USA, and we hope that this study will also be extended to Asia. Finally, Malaysia would like to encourage caution in the distribution of the full results to safeguard songbird species from the threat of poaching. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. I give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states fully support the renewed decisions listed in Annex 1 of the document submitted by the Animals Committee. We believe that further work needs to be done on this issue, and identifying particular taxa of songbirds that are affected by trade is crucial for their protection. It is important that the necessary funding be available for these activities as soon as possible. Therefore, we support that the COP adopts the set of decisions proposed in its entirety, including Decision 18.259. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, and I see Singapore. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Singapore aligns with the other parties that have spoken. So songbird prized for their beautiful vocal and colorful plumage face threats from habitat loss, poaching, and illegal wildlife trade. In 2019, Singapore seized 815 birds hidden in bars in an attempt to smuggle them into Singapore. This makes it the largest seizure of ornamental birds in Singapore in the past 5 years. And the birds seized belong to several different species: the white rum shama, oriental magpie, oriental white-eye, scaly breasted munia, which are in decline today across their range. So Singapore has zero tolerance for wildlife trafficking, and Singapore has a robust whole-of-government domestic measures combine strong enforcement efforts, tough law, and heavy penalties. Also like to highlight that source transit destination countries need to do more to keep up on its conservation effort, to remain vigilant, to establish strong network with parties, and to enhance their enforcement efforts to combat illegal wildlife trade. So all parties need to play their part as members of the international community to collectively protect wildlife and combat illegal wildlife trade. In this regard, Singapore has formed a task force with a regional country to work on intelligence sharing and enforcement operations to combat illegal songbird trade. So overall, Singapore supports the renewed recommendation in CoP19 document 74 to undertake the study, and Singapore is happy to be part of the technical workshop. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Singapore. With no further requests from parties, I'll see if there's any requests from observers. So I see the Convention on Migratory Species.
Thank you, Chair. The CMS Secretariat welcomes the draft decisions on songbird trade and conservation management, which is yet another topic contained in the CMS CITES joint work program. As such, the Secretariat supports the amendments proposed by the Secretariat. We would like to highlight that under CMS, specific regional platforms and mandates have already been established to address the illegal killing, taking, and trade of migratory birds, including trade in migratory songbirds. Benchmarking initiatives include the Intergovernmental Task Force on Illegal Killing, Taking, and Trade of Migratory Birds in the Mediterranean, to which the CITES Secretariat is an observer, and the Intergovernmental Task Force on Illegal Hunting, Taking, and Trade of Migratory Birds in the East Asian Australasian Flyway, currently under establishment. In addition, decisions have been adopted by CMS COP, which particularly and precisely address elements related to the illegal taking of migratory songbirds, such as CMS Decision 13.30 on a global situation analysis on the production, sale, use, and regulation of use of mist nets and other sorts of nets used for bird trapping. The existing CMS platforms bring together the range states, as well as relevant experts and stakeholders. They stand ready to significantly foster the collection of data on international and domestic trade, to hold technical workshops, and to support the preparation of output documents on conservation, trade, management, enforcement, and regulatory priorities of the songbird trade, as requested in CITES Decision 18.256. The implementation of the CITES decisions, if adopted, will also support the implementation of intergovernmental and multi-stakeholder work programs on illegal killing, taking, and trade of migratory birds, and foster the synergies between CITES, CMS, and our common partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Convention on Migratory Species, I'll give the floor to BirdLife.
Thank you, Chair. We make this shortened intervention on behalf of AZA, EASA, IUCN, Mandai Nature, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, Species 360, Taronga Conservation Society, Traffic, WCS, WWF, WASA, ZAA Australasia, and ZSL. The issue of international songbird trade remains urgent and unresolved, with little tangible progress made in taking forward the decisions made at COP18. Songbirds represent more than half of the world's bird species. They remain gravely underrepresented in CITES, despite their prevalence in international trade, both legal and illegal. This trade is expected to continue at increasing levels, and it is critical to address the knowledge gaps which continue to hamper a true understanding on the scale of this trade. We therefore fully support COP19 Document 74 to renew the commitments from COP18 on songbird trade and conservation management. And as a consortium of global organizations who continue to work on this matter, we offer our support in its implementation to ensure that it is prioritized and momentum is sustained into the next COP cycle. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, BirdLife International. I'll give the floor to HSI, but please can you be very brief so we can move on, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking also as a member of the Asian Songbird Trade Specialist Group of IUCN. We strongly support the interventions made by BirdLife, by other countries. We agree with Malaysia that this is a global issue and that it is one CITES must address with the urgency it addressed the Asian turtle crisis some years ago. We would point out that songbirds are in serious trouble. One recent paper noted that 84% of bird confiscations in Indonesia in the last decade were songbirds. This is a group that CITES has not addressed with a level of representation on the appendices it should have, and we encourage CITES to take a more serious approach to this group in future, and we would be very glad to assist. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, HSI, and thank you all for your observations. I think it's clear there's lots of support for the draft decisions in Annex 1 as originally submitted, and the renewal of the relevant decisions, in other words, 18256 to 18259. So with that, I think we can adopt those draft decisions as a recommendation from this committee and move on to, well, I'm looking at the time actually, and the next item on our agenda is document 60 on amphibians, and perhaps trying to squeeze it into 15 minutes might be ambitious, but perhaps we can try if parties could cooperate. So I think I will go open item 60, document 60 on the conservation of amphibians, which has been submitted by the Animals Committee, and I invite the chair of the Animals Committee to introduce the document. You have the floor, Switzerland.
At CoP18, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18194 to 18196 on conservation of amphibians. They were directed to the Secretariat, the Animals and the Standing Committee. The decisions directed the Secretariat to conduct one or more interdisciplinary workshops for CITES authorities and other relevant authorities and stakeholders about amphibian species in international trade, and to report on the progress in the implementation of these workshops to the Animals Committee, including any relevant recommendations. The Animals and Standing Committee should then review these results and make recommendations to COP as appropriate. Some limited progress on the implementation of these decisions has been made, as reported in paragraphs 3 to 5 of this document. Therefore, due to the tight time frame between AC31 and COP19, the travel and meeting restrictions as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the lack of sufficient resources to fully prepare for and convene the workshops as envisaged in Decision 1894, the Animals Committee proposes to extend the decisions beyond COP19 as presented in Annex 1 to the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Animals Committee Chair. And with that, I open the floor from parties. But please be very brief. Just focus on the decisions, whether you're content with those in Annex 1. I will take silence as indicating you are content. So with that, I give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Colombia es el segundo país con mayor diversidad de anfibios en el mundo, con más de 700 anuros. Creemos que este documento y sus proyectos de decisión son de vital importancia, pues buscan consolidar la mejor información disponible sobre los anfibios, los niveles de comercio, sobre las tendencias poblacionales, y que esta información constituya el insumo principal para la conservación de especies en los apéndices, para la consideración de las especies en los apéndices de la Convención. De igual manera, también considera relevante que dentro de los proyectos de decisión que están incluidos para adopción no se restringe exclusivamente a los talleres en línea y procurar fondos para facilitar intercambios presenciales. Colombia apoya el documento, prorrogar las decisiones y sus proyectos de decisión. Gracias, señor presidente.
So, Colombia, are you suggesting a change in the draft decisions? And could you clarify where you would want that, or you're just a general point?
Sí, gracias, señor presidente. Es solamente para que se procuren los fondos para que se genere digamos que el taller de manera presencial. Es una observación.
Okay, thank you. Colombia, I give the floor to Costa Rica and then Mali.
Señor presidente, buenos días. Para nosotros los anfibios son un grupo prioritario, son el principal grupo de vertebrados de los más amenazados y actualmente enfrentan una crisis mundial de extinción. Según la lista roja de la UICN, más del 40% de las especies de anfibios evaluados se encuentran amenazados o extintos a nivel mundial, lo cual representa más de 2.500 especies. Aunque la destrucción del hábitat y las enfermedades son consideradas las mayores amenazas a las poblaciones de anfibios, la explotación de anfibios es una presión adicional y podría convertirse en la mayor amenaza si no se toman las acciones correspondientes por parte de las partes. Los anfibios se enfrentan a una crisis mundial de extinción y por ende Costa Rica apoya a que este documento de decisiones, esta propuesta, con la modificación. Quisiéramos hacer un llamado apoyando a Colombia de que este taller se haga presencial. Esto ayudaría o permitiría tener esa interacción con los especialistas, tener ese tú a tú que muchas veces es fundamental y necesario para poder entendernos como países. Gracias.
Mali, you have the floor. Again, I ask you to focus on the draft
Merci
decisions.
bien, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, la situation des amphibiens dans mon pays, c'est très critique du fait que les écosystèmes qui renferment ces animaux, aujourd'hui avec les changements climatiques, alors la plupart de ces cours d'eau sont à sec. Et pour que ces animaux puissent vivre, il faut justement des conditions écologiques très favorables. Il y a également la destruction des habitats. Sinon, par rapport aux autres pays, le commerce de ces espèces, même s'il doit se faire à faible échelle. Et du coup, notre pays serait heureux d'être avec ceux qui proposent cet atelier concernant le commerce des amphibiens et de faire des recommandations. Et nous soutenons justement, Monsieur le Président, cette proposition et nous demandons aussi avec nos voisins de participer également au soutien de cette proposition. Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mali. I give the floor to Peru, followed by Argentina.
Gracias, presidente. Sí, Perú también apoya el documento. Somos un país con amplia diversidad de anfibios endémicos y también en peligro. Apoyamos la decisión de contar con un taller que permita también la participación de especialistas en el tema. Gracias.
Thank you, Peru, and for being very brief. And I make that request to the remaining 3 parties on my list, and I'm not taking any more after that. So Argentina, Burundi, and Guinea, and the list is closed at that point.
Gracias, señor presidente. Argentina también apoya este documento y estamos también a favor de la realización de este taller. Pensamos que la situación de los anfibios a nivel mundial lo amerita. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Burundi, then Guinea.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Burundi est en l'aire de répartition de beaucoup d'amphibiens, mais dont la plupart restent inconnus, soutient la proposition de décision et souhaite qu'il y ait des financements pour faire une identification effective de ces amphibiens et faire un plan de gestion adéquat. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
give the floor to Guinea.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Également, cette proposition du comité et se rallie au Mali et demande les autres parties de soutenir cette proposition.
Thank you, Guinea. I see Eritrea. I think you pressed the button just as I said I closed the list. And so as a final party, please, if you can be very brief.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. We thank the Animals Committee for the submission of the document on amphibians. Eritrea is a range set for many amphibians. We support the draft decision on conservation of amphibians, but also we also support the recommendation made by Colombia that meeting be organized in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Eritrea. I will open the floor for a couple of observers, if they can be brief. But I don't see any requests on the floor. Just one moment, please. Okay, I've got one request from observers, the European Pet Organization. I think you have the floor, but again, I ask you to be brief.
Oui, bonjour Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais simplement, puisqu'il y a le prolongement de cet atelier, de ce groupe de travail, pouvoir y participer.
Okay, we note your comment. Of course, the workshop has yet to be organized or funded and so on. And we've heard various comments on preferences for it to be face-to-face or and parties requesting funding for that. So I've heard quite a few comments in relation to having a workshop, lots of support for it. I think there's lots of support for the draft decisions as originally drafted in Annex 1. And with that, I will conclude that we adopt those draft decisions as a recommendation to the plenary. In adopting those draft decisions, I think it's necessary to delete the previous set of decisions, 18.194 to 18.196, because they are in effect now superseded. So with that, I will draw this item to a close. We've just got, we're still within time, according to my phone. The only things that I will check with the Secretariat whether there are any announcements or not. I invite you all to come back at 2 p.m. promptly, please. We will be working on the listing proposals this afternoon from where we left off yesterday. And immediately after lunch, I will also give you my plans in more detail for this evening. So we do have a request from the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Chair. As usual, just to remind all delegates of the working groups which are taking place this lunchtime. The Wildlife Crime Enforcement Support in West and Central Africa, taking place in ISMO 2 at 12:15. Budget Working Group continues in Pacifico 1 at 12:15. And the Rhinoceros Working Group, document 75, is taking place in ISMO 3, also at 12:15. And the final reminder, please take your cards with you, but not your headsets. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And with that, I close this morning's session of Committee 1. Thank you. Have a nice lunch.